Right then, hello everyone. Have we started, Chris? Okay, let's say hello to everybody. Hello everyone, how are you? Thanks for coming along and joining us. Slightly informal start there, and welcome to the show. And of course, if you could give a welcome as well to our lovely signer, Sammy, who will be with us throughout the show. If you are hard of hearing, we have a captioned option to see the show. If you get any problems with it, you just email Chris at Go Faster Stripe and he will come down like some god of tech and sort it out. Um, so where are we? What are we up to? Let me couple of announcements before we get going. I should tell you the format of the show. I'm going to introduce it in a minute. Then we have the show. Then we have a break. Then we have a second half. And on the second half, I'll be talking with some of the people who are involved in some of the stuff of the show. We've got Dave Smith from the Construction Blacklist, who was a blacklisted builder and has worked on spike ops and the infiltration of trade unions and all of that. We have got Alison, who is, that's not her real name, that's her nom de guerre. Alison is one of the women who was spied on by the undercover cops. And then we've got Sam Perlow Freeman, who is coming up in the end, and he is from Campaign Against Arms Trade, and we're going to get a legal update on the legal challenges they're doing. So that's the way. And then, of course, well, basically, we're all primed for the spontaneous Gramscian uprising. Apart from that, sorry, Sammy, I just suddenly. There's a lot of improvising here, isn't there, Sammy? So you suddenly had to go spontaneous Gramscian uprising. I'm sure it wasn't a problem for a professional like you. However, a couple of other announcements to make. Oh, yeah, and then we'll go to the chat rooms if there are any other questions. Here is the big one. We've got our next lockdown live. We are doing vintage cuts of the Mark Thomas comedy product called Best Before. And I'm doing it with Jeff Atkinson, who was the show's producer. And when Jeff and I did the show, it was like we were like a double-headed monster. We lived and breathed this. I mean, it was just, it was, we were obsessed with it to the extent that we'd finish work, go home, and then get on the phone to each other. And actually, our prospective partners used to call our respective partners used to call us the wife. The wife's on the phone. So Jeff and I will be introducing our favourite bits and talking about the stories behind various things and little bits of gossip and all of that. So that'll be good. Then we've got a Christmas special where I'm going to tell some stories live. I'm going to do live stories and they're really good. They're lovely and a little bit heartbreaking. And then two other things. I know there's a lot of things to take in, but Christmas is always a bit, it's a bit naff sometimes if you're by yourself, and it can be tight, and especially at COVID and all of that kind of stuff. And we're in lockdown, people can find it difficult. So what I'm doing is on Christmas Eve, Go Faster Chris and I are running a thing, and that is on Christmas Eve from 8:30 to 11:30. We will have a YouTube channel up in which I will be talking to comics writers and artists about their favorite. I'll be getting them to give their favorite 2 Christmas songs, and then we're going to play them. And that's what we're going to do. We have got loads of people lined up who are absolutely brilliant. We've got people like the amazing Josie Long, who is fantastic. We've got Ian Rankin and Denise Minor. For crime writers and for lovers of Scottish crime, you'll know Denise Minor and Ian Rankin are like, this is Rebus territory. This is royal. We have got Marcus Brigstock. We have got Omid Jaleli. We have got David Baddiel. We have got all sorts of people talking about it. Shazia Mirza's doing it, who's my favourite comic at the moment. You should go and see her. She's amazing. We can't, but when you get a chance to. And Bill Drummond from the KLF, burnt a million quid. KLF. Who wrote the book The 17, which is all about how he hates recorded music. And The 17 was a book about how he got 17 people in choirs. So he would record choirs of 17 people. Could be 17 fishermen thinking about sea scallops and singing in the tune of E minor. Do you know what I mean? And he'd record it and then play it to them once and then destroy the recording to show the importance of the moment. And it's a lovely book. And Bill's a great artist. So just for a laugh, I wrote to him because I sort of know him a bit. I said, Bill, would you come and play your favourite Christmas records? And he has written us a short play That's what he's done in response. Chris, did I tell you that? He's written us a short play, and so we'll be performing the short play on Christmas Eve, as well as. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask people to donate to Samaritans and to Trussell Trust. You know, you've seen the news today. You've seen what the Tories have done. You know, you've seen how they behave. The CAAT treat us. They treat us. We have to. We have to help each other, and we have to reach out to each other, and we have to support each other. And especially if you're on the left, or if you consider yourself, you know, a person of faith or what have you, you know, we have to walk the walk, and we have to reach out and help each other in communities. So I've done my bit now. Listen, it's really great that you're here, and thank you for joining us. And I really hope you enjoy the show. As always, lots of love. This is Cuckooed.
I am a very good liar. But everything I'm going to tell you in the next hour is true. There's one lie. And that evolves around the number 12. So now you know it, you'll be able to spot it. Not really a lie. 24th of May, 2014. I write a letter. Dear Martin, if you have your old mobile phone number, you'll see I texted you. I'm doing a new show, and it's about our relationship. It would be good to talk to you, at the very least, so you can put forward your position. It would also be good to talk to you because I think at some point you were my friend, and I need to know what you did and didn't do with that friendship. Doesn't have to be a recorded interview or anything like that. It would just be good to grab a cuppa and a natter. Yours, Mark. Martin was campaign coordinator for Campaign Against Arms Trade for 7 years, and he was my friend. 2003. It is a beautiful late summer morning, and the sun shines down the River Thames from the east like a golden dart. I'm standing outside a hotel near Tower Bridge. Inside are arms dealers who are come down to London for the London Arms Fair. Activists from all across the country have assembled in the capital to protest their presence. We shall march against the arms fair. We shall demonstrate against it. Wave banners, shout slogans. We shall hold vigils, light candles, sing songs, blockade, lock on, obstruct public and private highway. This is our ascot. Dress code, army surplus, somewhat ironically. 8:15. The arms dealers are milling around the lobby after breakfast, and I send in 2 female friends who dress up well in corporate attire. They walk into the lobby and they display printed and laminated signs that read, "Complimentary bus shuttle service to the arms fair. Please inquire here." Arms dealers are flocking across the lobby. Is it a free ride? Yes, it is. When does it leave? 10 minutes. Outside? Yes. I'll be on it. Now, I have hired a bus, which is now filling up with arms dealers. In the planning stages, one of the ideas was, if the arms dealers got on the bus, we would hire a Saddam Hussein impersonator to be the driver. In reality, the bus sets off to the arms fair 2 miles outside, and a friend of mine jumps up on the front seat, lifts up a camera, points it all the way down the length of the bus. I get on the in-bus tannoy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard the complimentary bus shuttle service to the arms fair. We are travelling at a height of 1 metre above the ground. We are moving at a speed of 3 miles an hour. This goes down to 1 in London traffic. Now, as members of the arms industry, you, your companies and your industry as a whole are complicit in the creation of Iraq's national debt. You sold weapons to Saddam Hussein. Then you got your governments to provide the underwriting. So when he didn't pay you for the weapons, you got paid out of taxpayers' money and you didn't go out of pocket. Then you transferred that debt onto the Iraqi people, who are still paying for the bullets of their own oppression. We know you feel very guilty about it. This is why we're passing around a collection plate. Put in as much as you can. Let's cancel Iraq's debt. £10.50. £10.50. And one arms dealer near the front, who was Italian, said to me, I would give you money, but your tactics are mafiosi. A mile from the arms fair, and boom, the bus stops. I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't got the security passes to get through the police cordon. I'm afraid you're going to have to get off. But you said you would take us to the arms fair. I know, but I haven't got the passes to get through the police line. But that means we have to walk about a mile to the arms fair. Yes, it does. Past all the protesters. That would appear to be the case, yes. BAE Systems, Britain's biggest arms manufacturer, are not on our bus. They have their own complimentary bus shuttle service. But if they will not get on our bus... Day 2. It is a beautiful late summer morning, and I'm running in a car park with my friends Martin, Gid, some hippies, some Quakers, and some students. We run towards a bus full of arms dealers. As it leaves the hotel car park, we stand in front of the bus, and bang, the bus stops. Once stationary, I nip underneath the vehicle and start to attach myself to the axle of the bus with a bicycle D-lock and my neck. I know, we rushed the planning meeting, if truth be told. I'm really nervous. My brain is moving way quicker than my body. So the D-lock slips over the axle, and then it gets stuck on my neck, and for a few seconds I think, oh, fuck, I'm too fat to be an activist. Bollocks, no wonder these fuckers are all vegans. You need to be skinny to do this shit. You'll never see a fat boy on a Greenpeace abseil. Then it slips on over, and I start to get the D-lock locked on. OK, this is going to come to you, you there, OK? You get ready to catch. I hope you're good at this. This is going to be a very different show from the one I had envisaged. Seriously, you better find that fucker. Brilliant. Well done. This will come to the love scene at the end. I pass the key out to an activist on the other side of the bus. This means I don't have the key on my person. This means if the police want to get me out, they have to negotiate with me, or they have to use an angle grinder. It also means you have to trust the person you're working with quite a lot. Under the bus, it is, well, it's out in the sun and it's quite chilled, and the voices are quite angry, but they're outside and they're at a distance, so they're dimmed, and there's a chill that comes in from the concrete lying on it that just creeps into my back. The weird thing is there is a smell, and the smell is of dust and oil, and it reminds me of my dad's workshop, and it's strangely calming. Bobby slides in next to me. What the fuck are you doing, Bobby? You're supposed to be doing legal observation. I know, but it looks like fun. I bought a chain. I'm joining in. Bobby chains himself to the axle, then gets his phone out. All right, love. Yeah, listen, I've joined the lock-on. Yeah, I'm underneath the bus. Yeah, I'm tied up right. Yeah, I know, predictable. No, it's going to be a nick, love. Yeah, seriously, it's a proper nick. No, yeah, seriously, I'm going to miss tea. It's a proper nick. Yeah, all right, yeah, I love you, buddy. Bye. Next to him, I'm a rank amateur. This man has experience, and I'm just a novice at this. After an hour, the police arrived to tell us that the arms dealers who have locked themselves on the bus are going to be escorted back to the hotel, and that some of them are taking the rest of the day off work because they have been traumatised by the experience. The activist with the key throws it neatly. Or thereabouts. I managed to catch it, undo the lock, come out from under the bus, bang! First thing that happens is I am arrested. Then I see up in the sky there is a police helicopter. At the River Thames next to me there is a police motor launch. There are 4 police vans, there's riot cops, there's armed police. There is a whole line of onlookers, and as I am led past those onlookers towards the police van to be taken to the station, past all the bystanders, all the business people, all the local residents, past all the hippies and the Quakers and the students, as I'm led past that line, Martin pushes his way through the crowd, pushes right up against the tape on the police, and as I'm about to get in the van, he goes, "Oi, Tomo! Clenched fist salute, mate! Come on, I've got a camera!" I'm so nervous, all I can manage is... In the making of this show, I went and found old friends and comrades, people who knew Martin and myself from 10 years ago, and I talked to them, and they're going to help me tell the story, and I want to introduce you to them. This is Nick Hilliard. Now, Nick, he works for an environmental and human rights NGO. This is me and Nick together at Glastonbury Festival. I should say the Peruvian orphanage is just in the background. It's coincidental. We are neither buying nor selling. It's there by chance. Nick, by all accounts, is one of the most preeminent activists in this country. He is smart. He knows where to apply pressure to elicit change. He is ethical. But for all his brilliance, he is somewhat unworldly. Once I was talking to him about watching telly with my son and how my son had said, "Oh, Dad, you're so like Homer." And Nick had said, "Well, in many ways he's right. The episodic storytelling structures of your work..." We mean the yellow fella, not the Greek. This is Laura Nichols. Now, Laura is a Taekwondo instructor. She's a Minnie Mouse impersonator for kids' parties, and she's a peace activist. This is me and Laura at Menwith Hill Spy Base in North Yorkshire. Laura's in red, I'm in the kimono, my mate Cookie's in the white. We've sat on the bonnet of a police car to stop it arresting some friends. That is nearly a perfect moment. This is Emily Apple, and Emily is a direct action queen, as this photo attests. Emily, I always had you as tight with Martin.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, he was a really, really, really good friend.
To the extent that your son, well, Martin is his godfather, isn't he?
Secular godfather, yeah.
That's Emily Apple. This is Gid Burrows. Now, Gid, he was in his early 20s. Look how fresh face he is there. He was in his early 20s when he met Martin. Martin was in his mid-40s, so Martin was something of a father figure to him, though not in a conventional sense.
I was with that guy dancing on a table in Wolverhampton, you know, in a nightclub, totally pissed out our heads.
As I said, not in a conventional sense. Gid, Emily, Laura and I, we were friends with Martin. Martin was our friend. He wasn't just an activist buddy. He wasn't someone you nodded to at a demo. I mean, we knew him. We knew his family. I gave his son a lift to college. Emily's son, Martin, was a godfather. I mean, we shared stuff together. We stayed with each other. I shared a bed with him.
I probably saw Martin naked about 30 times.
Gid has a tendency to overshare. 2003, the arresting suite, a desk this high, runs the entire length of the room. Periodically, there are computer terminals, and periodically, there are police officers behind them processing the protesters as they come through. Name, Mark Thomas. Occupation, comedian. Cop on the end goes, "On a fucking good night he is." I've been heckled by a cop as I'm being arrested. My comeback is vicious and incisive, and I think of it on the way home. Inside the cell, it literally is chilled. It's tiled, and the bed is made of wood. And if activists now ask me, "We're going on a demo, we might get arrested, what advice have you got?" I say, "Take a book. You'll need to fill time." After a period of time has elapsed, a police officer appears at the cell door. "Mr. Thomas," "Yes. There's a solicitor on the phone for you, Mr. Thomas." I've spoken to one already, thank you, officer." "Well, it's another one, Mr. Thomas, very insistent. Wants to talk to you, wants to check we haven't abused your human rights, Mr. Thomas. This way, if you wouldn't mind, phone on the wall. There you go, just take it off the... That's the one, take it off the hook." I pick up the phone. "Hello?" A voice on the other end goes, "Ah, Tomo, you wanker!" It's Martin. He's convinced the police he is a solicitor and has been put through. "You all right, Tomo?" "I'm fine." "You got something to read?" "I've got nothing." "I'll get you something. That'll be much appreciated." "I'll see if they'll take a copy of Razzle on the front desk." "Don't do that. Please don't do that." "I'll tell them if you don't have a wank every 2 hours, you get violent. Please." Later that evening, I am charged with criminal damage. And there's a trial later on. It lasts 2 days. I am acquitted because they cannot find any criminal damage with which to attach to me. And it is still entirely possible in the British Court of Law to be innocent if there is no evidence of a crime. Now, I am about to walk outside. I hover by the police station door. Oh, my friends, I am no hero. There's nothing special. I just did what anyone would have done. I'm an everyman. Like you, like many of, like some, like one or two, like the odd one of you. I do not expect an adulating crowd to await me as I walk out of the police station. I do not expect a mob. I do not expect people hanging from lampposts chanting my name. Viva, viva. I do not expect that. I do not expect people to have morphed my photo with the classic Che Guevara image and printed it on T-shirts. I don't. I do not expect women to throw flowers at my feet, nor themselves. Nor do I expect children to be named after me. Not yet. Not yet. I do expect half a dozen activists to be standing there going, hello, Tomo, how are you? No one. The street is bare, save Martin, sitting on a step with a pile of fag butts around his foot. As I come out of the station, he stands up, deck shoes, chinos, golfing shirt, wire glasses and flick-back grey hair, and goes, all right, mate, let's get a fucking drink. Ours was a friendship born in protest. I asked Emily, how many protests did you go on with Martin?
On a lot of the May Day protests together, went to Genoa together to the G8 protests there, got tear gas together there, went to New York together.
This sounds an odd question, but if you're an activist and you're with other activists and you get tear gassed, is it a bonding experience?
I think a lot of activism is. Whenever you do those sort of things where you're in a very highly charged, adrenaline-fueled situation and quite often doing something quite dangerous, the bonds you get with people are immense.
That holds true even today. 10 years later, I go and visit my friends and we are quick to find fondness in our voice when we remember Martin. Laura, for these good people, describe Martin to them.
Describe him.
Yeah.
Cockney builder.
Literally false, but very accurate. Perfect. Emily.
One of the things I always loved about him was he was so different, and he didn't give a shit that he was so different.
Gid, what was Martin like with other activists?
Totally inappropriate and brutally honest.
Emily, describe Martin's sense of humour.
Oh. Dry, dirty and sarcastic. And totally irreverent, which I love.
Campaign Against the Arms Trade was set up in the mid-70s by a group of Quakers, and it's always found it difficult to shake the image that it is a Quaker organisation. In reality, it's actually predominantly run by Guardian-reading atheists. Regardless, neither Quaker nor Guardian-reading atheists are noted for their Monday morning stories of weekend wildness. A story from the Quakers of weekend excess will run like this. What'd you get up to at the weekend? Went on a retreat. What was it like? Quiet. And that's it. Martin comes into the office Monday morning. Fucking hell, the wife found the Viagra in my jacket pocket. She's gone up the wall. I've said, love, it ain't for anyone else. Honestly, I'm just getting on a bit and I need to look after you properly. She says, I believe you and you're on for tonight. That night, she goes upstairs, I wait 10 minutes, I drop one of the Viagra, I go up after her, she's fast asleep. I've woken her up and gone, love, I thought you said we were... Oh, no, darling, but I'm tired. Why don't we do it tomorrow? But why don't you go downstairs and watch telly, eh? Watch the football. So I go downstairs and I watch the football, sitting on a sofa with a cup of tea and a raging hard-on for 3 fucking hours. And I don't think the Quakers knew how to relate to that. Nick, as someone who was outside the group, how would you assess Martin?
There was everything in Martin that was a person who was totally dedicated to the cause. Dedicated, anti-arms trade campaigner, but not just an anti-arms trade campaigner, a campaigner who was interested in other issues, who saw the value in being able to link campaigns. He wasn't just a foot soldier.
Nick and I used to run a campaign together called the Ilisu Dam campaign. It was about infrastructure projects in the Kurdish region in Turkey. Fairly esoteric by campaigner standards. Martin was all over it. He was involved in anti-globalisation protests. He was involved in anti-privatisation protests. He was involved in environmentalism. Once I called him, I forget why I had cause to call him, but it was in the morning, and I remember his reply, because he picked up the phone and said, "Can't speak, Tomo, I'm chained to a petrol pump." What? It's a Friends of the Earth action. You know, climate change, funding Bush, war for oil. Have the cops arrived? Yeah, the cops came over and have said, "How long do you intend to remain here, sir?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Well, will you let us know when you're leaving, please?" I said, "You're kidding." He said, "I know, they could have done me for trespass, but they weren't going to say anything. I weren't going to say anything." They did get narky when I lit a fag. For me, the story that sums up Martin best, we were at a Green Party auction. There's friends and family and comrades, and there's a room where they display everything on these tables that you can bid for in the auction. So there'd be like a table, and it's got like a gift certificate for Reiki healing and some driftwood that looks like Gandhi and some biodegradable death sarcophagus pod. And in the middle is this incredible panoramic photo of the anti-Iraq war march in London. Absolutely amazing, black and white, taken from way up and high up, and just thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people streaming across the streets of London. And we stand transfixed by this image of the seething sea of human ants. And Martin says, "Fucking hell, that's me!" And it was. This is a man so much larger than life that he stands out in a march of millions. These people, these are my friends, and I love them. These are activists who are the McCoy. They put their money where their mouth is, and Martin, he did it for me. He was working class, rough round the edges. He was prone to acts of kindness. He would cry at the drop of a hat, and he used to work in the arms trade and now campaigned against it. It was as if he had walked out of every single Johnny Cash song I have ever loved. 3 weeks after Martin waited for me outside the police station, he is accused of spying for BAE Systems by infiltrating campaign against arms trade. He has always publicly denied this allegation. At the time, I was working in television, and it would be fair to say the work I did involve an element of deception. It would be unfair to say I enjoyed the deception or I liked it. I fucking adored it. It was mainlining. Once, we set up a front PR company called Macintosh Morley PR. We were offering bogus media advice to people in trouble with human rights allegations. What we did, we hired an exhibition stall at a Greek arms fair in Athens called Defendry. Hundreds and hundreds of arms dealers, thousands of people attended, and the first stall they saw was ours. All the dignitaries, all the diplomats, all the ministers, all the majors, all the generals, the first thing they see, Macintosh Morley PR. And then we had this enormous poster made up, which we hung in front of the stall that just reads, "Are you ready when Amnesty International come knocking on your door?" Loads of military people see the words amnesty and go, "You're Amnesty International." No, we're not. We're the good guys. When Amnesty come knocking at your door at 2 o'clock in the morning and drag you away from your family who look on helpless, unable to do anything, when they drag you into a basement dungeon/TV studio and question/interrogate you, we're the people you want on your side. We've got a little makeshift TV studio here. We are offering free media training. 10 minutes. Come on in. What have you got to lose? Day 2. I'm peeling the lid off the first coffee when a man appears before me. Beige jacket, green tie. "My name is Major General Wijoyo. I'm from the Indonesian Armed Forces. I wish to do your free media training." Come on in, Major General Wijoyo. Come on in, come on in. Take a seat down in our little media thing here. Now, just sit here in what we like to call the interrogation chair. Now, this is how we run it. Chris here, he is going to play the role of interviewer, so he'll ask you questions about human rights abuse. Simon will film the whole thing. Now, the only reason we film this is so that we've got and a way of analysing your performance at a later date so we can give you an in-depth analysis of your performance. My job is to provide strategies and tactics of how you might handle the questions. Now, this will probably be a first time for you. You might get a little bit uncomfortable. So, to take away the sting of criticism, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some toys here, some soldiers, some animals, and some superheroes. If you do well, I will give you more. If you do less well, I will take them away, okay? Right, Chris, are you ready? Major General Wijoyo? Okay, in your own time. Chris opens up an arch lever file full of amnesty reports and turns to the Indonesia section. Indonesia is accused of genocide in East Timor, of the systemic rape of ethnic Chinese women in Jakarta, of torture, of extrajudicial killing, of disappearance. Major General Wijoyo is nearly out of his chair in fury. This is not fair. Amnesty are a very Western organisation and they simply do not understand cultural differences. Oh, that was a very aggressive response. I'm going to have to take away a Spider-Man and an octopus. Now, Major General Wijoyo, what we do is we operate a policy and a practice we like to call partial admission. That list of human rights abuses, you would need to be a monster to have committed them, but you would need to be a madman to admit to them. Therein lies the difficulties. You deny everything, and there is a credibility gap. How do we bridge that gap? Is there anything on that list you can admit to? Not all of it, just one or two things. Only do it if it's true. Only do it if you feel able to do it. But is there anything you can admit to? Yes. And what's that? Torture. You can admit to torture, just a little bit of torture. Okay, let's start with a little bit of torture and let's see if we can win back Spider-Man. Major General Wijoyo looks at the camera and then he looks at me and he says, "This isn't going anywhere, is it?" I promise you. This is just between you and me.
We do have to do it sometimes, but it is to protect the community.
Let me just ask you, so just let's clarify. So you do accept that your country does torture people and repress them?
We did some tortures. Not meaning to say that we have.
How do you justify that?
It is to protect the security of this society. If not, they will lose food, they will lose the freedom to move, and they will lose the freedom of expression, they will lose the freedom to educate their children.
So what you're saying to us, General Jojo, is that you have to torture people so that people can have drinking water?
Yes, and all the rights that they have.
It transpires that Martin and I shared a talent for deception. But deception is a heady drug and you have to control how you use it. Just before going to the arms fair in Athens, I went to see a Channel 4 lawyer called Neil Pepin. Right, Mark, you want to film secretly? Come back and broadcast. OK, there are rules, there are regulations, I know. And one of them is that I have to tell you the rules and regulations each and every time. Now, you can secretly film and broadcast if you find people in these categories. 1, lying. Now, that's fairly obvious. It has to be something big, though. It has to be going against a majorly stated public policy, not just an infidelity. 2, breaking the law. Again, fairly obvious. Acting illegally, must be above speeding. 3, you can secretly film and broadcast if you find someone acting against the public interest. Now, this might be something that is legal in their country, but really shouldn't be. So, like Iran and killing dissidents. That would be acting against the public interest. So, those are the categories, Mark. Acting against the public interest, lying, breaking the law. Now, do you think you will find anyone who will fit into those categories at the arms fair? I've a hunch I'll get lucky. Also, Mark, there are rules and regulations when you get back. When you get back, you have to admit the deception quickly and you have to put all the allegations to the person you're going to make them about, get their response and publish their right to reply. I liked the fact there are rules and regulations about deception. I like the fact you have to admit the deception quickly. Why? Because I'm a show-off and it's pointless doing it if you don't get to brag. Now, there is one more person that I want you to meet. This is Anne Feltham. Anne is the parliamentary coordinator for Campaign Against Arms Trade. I actually said to her, you run Campaign Against Arms Trade, don't you? And she said, no, I don't. It's just I've been here longer than anyone else, which is partially true. It's also true that no one on the left will fucking admit to running anything. If you say to people on the left, who's the leader? No, we've not got a leader, Mark. We've got a horizontal decision-making process of consent. Anne runs Campaign Against Arms Trade. It is the 26th of September, 2003.
It was a Friday afternoon.
Anne is in the office when there is a knock on the door.
It was a Sunday Times journalist. He had one sheet of paper with a kind of report that he said had gone to BAE that was describing activities in our office.
Anne has just met the Sunday Times Insight team, their investigative unit, and they're about to publish their scoop of the year. Anne goes with the journalist to the Sunday Times office,
where they showed us this kind of heap of papers, which were kind of X went to a meeting and Y went to a meeting, and all sorts of details about what had been going on in our office.
Long story short, a man called Alan Fossey is exposed as spying for BAE Systems by infiltrating Campaign Against Arms Trade office in Hull.
But it was quite apparent, and they knew it was apparent, that some other people had been spying on us as well.
So, I ask Anne, did they suggest who those other people might be?
They didn't suggest who it might be.
Anne goes back to the Campaign Against Arms Trade office and she organises an audit of the office computer and its server. And then she produces a file of evidence.
Anne gave me the file, and I sat down in the top of the top room at CAAT in their old offices, and I read it, and it was extremely detailed, very forensic, and having read it, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that it was Martin.
Get Anne on the phone to me now! Get her on the phone to me now! I do not care if she's in a meeting. Get her out of the meeting. Get her out of the meeting now! I bet lots of people have been phoning up the Campaign Against Arms Trade office. I bet you have been busy. Get her out. I would love to leave you a message. What do you think you're doing is my message. What do you think you're doing? Vilifying and attacking the person who does more work than anyone else. Are you insane? Martin, you're saying Martin is a spy. I tell you what, if BAE Systems are paying him, they should give him a pay rise because he does more work than anyone else. You lot are fucking you. Let me ask you a question. Yeah, you. What do you do? Yeah, what do you, other than answer the phone and sound smug, what exactly is it you do? Do you go on vigils? Do you light candles? Do you sing with the nuns, do you? Against the arms trade? Do you think that's ever stopped one single arms deal? Your candles? I'll answer it for you. No! So I'll tell you what you do. You fuck off with your smug Quaker twattery and your porridge is shit too. I must have been a fucking nightmare on the day that I found out. And that must have been hard for whoever picked up the phone in the office.
Yeah.
And I'm genuinely sorry. Anne doesn't accept my apology. This was beyond our comprehension. We couldn't even begin to assess anything to do with this. They're accusing Martin of being a spy. This was incredulous. This was insanity to us. Laura, do you remember your reaction when you found out Martin had been accused of spying for BAE Systems?
I didn't believe it.
Why didn't you believe it?
The things he'd done and the things that he'd been involved in, it just didn't seem to like that it could be true. And also, I don't think it was helped by the fact that the people that were accusing him and had investigated it were the people that didn't like him in the office.
Go back to what he'd done and what he'd been involved in. What do you mean?
The things he'd been involved in, I mean, he'd pied Dick Evans, hadn't he?
Dick Evans?
He'd pied Dick Evans.
Dick Evans was BAE Systems Chief Executive Officer, and Martin had stuck a custard pie in his face. Gid, do you remember Martin pieing Dick Evans?
Yeah, I do. I was sitting next to him.
Dick Evans was speaking to some students at a London business school.
And we just decided we'd just, one way or another, get in there and custard pie him, basically spray. It was one of our old tricks, just use either spray cream, or it would be shaving cream, paper plate, because you can get them both into anywhere pretty much, and then just straight into the face.
We thought Martin can't be the spy. He put a pie in Dick Evans' face. But more than that, he was our friend. Just to look at the file of evidence would have been an act of betrayal. What did I do when I found out Martin had been accused of spying for BAE? I took him on tour with me. Now, we got a 4-seater tour car, and the driver and tour manager is a man called Bobster. Bobster did the shortest ever interview for the job of tour manager. I said to him, right, you want to be tour manager? Who else have you worked with? And he said, the first job I ever had was with The Clash. I said, here's the itinerary and the keys. Sitting behind Bobster is a man called Sam. Sam is a crusty of indeterminable origin, and he looks like a womble with a hard-on clutch and a can of Tennants. Sitting next to him is Martin, chain-smoking cheap cigarettes and moaning about the loud dub reggae that Sam insists on playing throughout the trip. Every now and again, Sam mistakenly believes that he's part of the sound system, and from the back seat you'll suddenly hear, "Rewind selector!" which he's wearing after a while. We're driving fast, and we're driving along the North Yorkshire moors through the narrow country lanes, and we're driving past the dry stone walls. Sunlight flashes in and out of the car, getting caught on the shadows of the trees and the bushes. And as I read the map, I go, "Oi! There's a stone circle near here. Pull over, pull over." We pull the car over and leave Bobster in the car. Me, Sam, and Martin go out across the North Yorkshire moors looking for the stone circle. I've no recollection if we found it. None whatsoever. But I do remember the way the landscape shot out across the horizon. I remember running down the hill and feeling as if the earth was falling from under my feet. I remember the dips and the divots in the soil. I remember the way it would fall in ridges, almost like steps. I remember the colour of the grass. I remember the blood rust brown of the peat soil. And I remember the water that builds up by the steps. And I remember Martin bending down and going, "Fucking hell, look what I found." And he brings up a ram's skull. We go charging back to the car. "Bobster, look what Martin's found." Bobster behaves with impeccable tour manager credentials and says, "Chain it to the radiator grill of the car." We chain the ram skull to the front of the car. We are in the middle of nowhere, but we sling open the car doors, turn the music up, and all of us pose for photos. Come on then, oi, oi, in the area! We're moving so fast, we nearly missed the voices of doubt. Nick had always said, "Look at the file, if only for your own peace of mind." And to be honest, there wasn't much peace to be found. Hardly anyone believed Martin anymore. We were the only ones left. And his behaviour was weird. I mean, it was like, he behaved like a man who was watching himself being watched, which he kind of was. And in truth, fear. Fear of being betrayed, fear of being duped, fear of being foolish, fear of being deceived. Fear now took its place in our hearts where loyalty once lay.
When everybody else had seemed to fall away, and there was you, me and Em, and very few others, you know, I think it would be fair to say that we're deluding ourselves or continuing to be deluded by him.
Now, at this point in the show, you may be asking yourself some questions. And one of the questions you may be asking is, Mark, why would a multi-billion-pound global arms industry be spying on a small group of Quakers and Guardian-reading atheists? Good question. I admire your intelligence. Well done. You're much better than the last audience. I really, really admire you. And I really admire the way you refuse to be easily flattered. That's very commendable. Now, let's be honest about where we are. Saturday night. This is your night out after a hard week, and you're here. Right? You might have had a day where you've been drinking all day, or you've been out shopping, you've come here, you've dressed up a little bit, maybe a few drinks here, sit down. Seats are nearly comfortable. The lights have gone down, the heat rises. One or two of you are glazing over. I am not judging in any way, shape or form. It's just that I can see more of you than you think I can. Now, the answer to the question most people have so rightly asked does involve some facts and some figures. And frankly, some of you aren't going to make it over the hump. So, for those of you with a tendency to nod off, here's the girl from Ipanema. Sit back, relax, slip your shoes off. I'll be back to you in a minute. For the rest of you, 1976, Indonesia invades East Timor and kills 1/3 of the population. BAE Systems win a rolling contract to supply fighter jets to Indonesia that are used in East Timor. 3 women decide they will find where these planes are stored in a hangar in Lancashire. They break in. They identify the planes going to Indonesia using serial number and flag recognition, and then they smash the cockpit of the plane with a hammer. They then call security, who arrest them. They are taken to jail. They do 6 months on remand, and in court, they are charged with criminal damage and conspiracy. But the judge allows them to run a defence, sometimes available in English law, that you can commit a small crime in order to prevent a greater crime occurring. You can smash the cockpit of a plane in order to stop the plane being used to take human life. BAE Systems are put in the dock. Expert witnesses are called from around the world. Eyewitness testimony comes in from East Timor, and the jury acquit the women and they walk free. BAE goes into complete tailspin. Not only do they suffer the ignominy of having lost a £13 million state-of-the-art fighter jet, which ironically is not hammer-proof. But they have had to face the dock. They're the people who were put in the court of public opinion, and they lose, and the women walk free. And it's then that BAE Systems put Campaign Against Arms Trade on the radar. Okay. Girl from Ipanema, people, back in the room. Nick had always said, he was always the one, look at the file, all the time. And do you remember me phoning you in the office that day to ask to come and see the file of evidence?
After you spoke to Nick?
It was after I'd spoken to Nick. But do you remember me calling you that day?
Yeah.
It wasn't just Nick, it was the fact that, well, Martin's behaviour was really odd. It was very defensive, it was very awkward. I actually thought he had a very good case against you for unfair dismissal. I volunteered to do a benefit gig to raise money for the court case, and look, this is slightly embarrassing. I suppose my question is, were you surprised?
I was pleased, because I always wanted those closest to it to read it. I thought you needed to.
Campaign Against Arms Trade office was in Finsbury Park, and it was one of those old, tall Georgian buildings. The staircase was long and steep and narrow, and at the top, there's a room, and there's some filing cabinets in it that's used for storage and archive material, campaign stuff, old legal work. And there's a table for the occasional meeting. And on the table is the file of evidence against Martin. I still feel sick. The evidence against Martin comes primarily from Campaign Against Arms Trade audit of the office computers and its server. The audit reveals that Martin has been forwarding internal campaign against arms trade emails and documents to a third party. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them over a series of years. When asked about this, Martin said he made those forwards by, well, he sent them on by mistake. It was an error. The third party is linked to a company run by a woman called Evelyn Lechen. Evelyn Lechen runs a company called Threat Response Initiative. Threat Response Initiative are a spying company. They collect information on CND members, campaign against arms trade members, trade unionists and leftists. So a company would pay a joiner's fee and then you would request information on a case-by-case basis. So you might ask for an individual's name, address, telephone number, national insurance number, known associates, political affiliations, and the cost is £2.25 per person. £2.25. In court documents, BAE Systems are forced to admit to spying on campaign against arms trade and to hiring Evelyn Lechen to do that spying for them. There are some interesting people on the board of directors of Evelyn Lechen's company, Threat Response Initiative, and one of them is Barry Charles Gaines, CMG OBE. Barry Charles Gaines, CMG OBE, is an ex-deputy director of MI6. To send someone an email by mistake is, you know, all of us, bar those of us that still use carrier pigeon, have done this. To send someone an email by mistake hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over a series of years is clumsy. To send them by mistake to Threat Response Initiative is unfucking believable. I phoned my friends.
Absolute fucking betrayal.
The complete betrayal of trust and privacy because he was giving away people's information.
I did think there was betrayal, but then I had never been the closest to him.
Shattering, actually, revelation for you.
Is there anything you want to tell me? I gave him, you know, the chance to just say, okay, and then walk away, you know? And he didn't. He said, no, there's no truth to this at all. And I believed him, because that's what you do with your best friend, you know? So he let me go to the wall for him, and that I can't come to terms with.
The phrase I'm looking for at this juncture is revenge fuck. I went on a series of revenge fucks. What do you do if the arms industry fucks you over? You fuck it back. I went on a 3-year spree. This is how you do it. It's quite easy. You set up a front arms company. Now, setting up the company is relatively easy. Would you please give me the name of an English county? Surrey. Surrey is perfect. Would you give me something a Viking might have? Helmet. Would you mind giving me the name of your first pet? Bonnie. You don't know how good that is. Would you mind giving me, if you don't mind, your grandmother's maiden name? Joyce. Joyce. Brilliant. The name of our arms company, Surrey Helmet. The CEO, Major General Sonny? Bonnie. CEO, Major General Bonnie Joyce. Now we've done the most difficult bit, which is getting the name. After that, it's a piece of piss. You set up some business cards, you get some email addresses, you get some mobile phones, one of them with an Irish number. Don't use pay-as-you-go, because you will look cheap in the world of business. Then you get an internet company to do your web design. Then you get a shared office. They're 2 a penny in London. They're really easy, just offices with loads of people who inhabit them. Well, they don't inhabit them. It's just an address. All the stuff gets sent there, and there's a receptionist. And when your phone number goes, bang, up comes the screen with your details. I'm really, really sorry, but there's no one in from Surrey Helmet. However, Bonnie takes all calls very seriously and will get back to you as soon as possible. And then you can talk to arms dealers. If I phone up an arms dealer now and say, hi, it's Mark Thomas at the Tricycle. Beep. If I phone up an arms dealer and say, hi, Surrey Helmet here. We're an arms company. We want to buy some guns. They say, of course you are. Why on earth would you call us if you weren't? What kind of guns would you like? Big ones. Would you like bullets? Yes, please. Can we supersize you with a grenade? That would be lovely. They will talk to you and they will tell you what they get up to. The first company I get, South London arms dealer supplying illegal electroshock torture equipment. I say, will you sell it? He says, yes, that is illegal. Then I say, will you give me the paperwork? He does. That is also illegal, but that's not good enough. I say, will you supply it to Zimbabwe and break UN sanctions? He says yes and supplies the paperwork. I've recorded the lot. I give it to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. We shut him down. Next, 5 companies I find at the London Arms Fair selling torture equipment and illegal electroshock. We publish in The Guardian, they shut the stalls, they kick them out of the fair, they are deported. Next, at a Birmingham police and security fair, I find a man discharging an electroshock baton in the fair. We are surrounded by cops, but the telltale blue flash and that drrrr seem to alert no one to the fact that the ownership, attempted sale and discharge of this weapon is illegal. So, I film him, and then I try and find a cop to get him arrested. It is harder than you might think at a police and security fair. First cop I see, excuse me, officer. He says, I'm off duty, mate, leave me alone. Second cop, officer, he says, quote, oh, I like you, I like your programme, I don't want to be in it. Fuck off. Third cop I see at the end of a corridor, standing erect in full uniform. I run up to him, he's a cardboard cutout for Poundland. You cannot find a cop anywhere. So I go to the organiser, we call the cops, the guy does 4 months on remand, then he's deported. Next, I get the richest men in London and I stop them doing a deal for military equipment in Sudan. Next, I get asked to give evidence to the Select Committee in Parliament on arms dealing. I write them 2 reports, they publish it in their report. Next, I get asked to give oral evidence before the Select Committee. I appear in the House of Commons, in the Select Committee room, and I face the horseshoe of MPs and say, I blame Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs for not using the laws you have given them and doing the simple things they could have done to expose illegality and wrongdoing. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs are called to account to give evidence of their lack of activity before the Select Committee. It is the first time they've ever been called to that Select Committee, and they are very, very, very pissed off. 3 weeks later, I get a VAT inspection. Now, I think we'll agree, as a set of revenge fucks go, that's not a bad crop. I will be the first to admit, it did not address any of the emotional issues. It didn't attempt to look at the trauma of the betrayal. It didn't do that at all. So what did it do? Well, it made me it restored my dignity as an activist. It made me feel better about myself. I was down to a size 12. 12. ...2007, and I get off the train, I stand on the platform at the station, I move through, I'm in the car park, and I'm going to Martin, I'm going to confront Martin at his home. But I stop in the station car park and I start running through all the questions I want to ask him because I don't want to see him and be befuddled by friendship. I get round to his house, it's about 7 o'clock in the evening, it's getting dark, and he works nights now, and I didn't know that then. And his wife, oh man, he lives in this house, right? It's a 2 up, 2 down, and like the fence had literally fallen in on the garden, and his wife answers the door. And I know her, and she instinctively says, oh, hello, Tomo, come on in, come on in, come in. How nice to see you. And I walk into the hall, and we both stop, and we stand there in silence, and then she says, I can't say anything, I daren't say anything. And we just stand there in the silence in this hall, and there's no wallpaper, just this plastered corridor with a slatted plastic laundry basket at the end. And then she repeats again, I can't say anything, I daren't say anything, he's not been good, Tomo, he's lost his mates, he's been very depressed. And I say, I wish we were meeting in other circumstances. And I leave, and I know one thing for certain, if Martin was getting paid by BAE Systems, they did not pay him very much. And it seems so strange to be concerned with a traitor's terms and conditions. But it is so hard to know who the villain is in this circumstance because he lives in a shithole. BA Systems endlessly expand into the ether of guns and money, and Evelyn Lachette is fine. She gets elected as president of a local Rotary Club, so she's accepted into polite, well, not polite society, but nearly polite society. And Martin lives in a 2 up, 2 down, and it's difficult to know who the villain is because there's not one law. I mean, not one law written by our democratically elected men and women to control the activities of corporate spying. Not one, not even a fucking register. I do find the home address of Evelyn Lachette. I find out where the spy mistress actually lives. Would you like to know the home address of Evelyn Lachette? Well, this is a show about data theft, so you need to get a grip. I write a letter to Evelyn Lachette. It reads, Dear Evelyn Lachette, you once took data about me. I wonder if you might return the compliment. Did you employ Martin? If so, when? And what information about me was passed on to you? I've enclosed £2.25 to cover your troubles. I also write a letter to Barry Charles Gaines, CMG, OBE. Same letter, except it starts with the words, As an ex-deputy director of MI6, you must be wondering how the fuck I got your home address. And I write to Martin, 24th of May, 2014. If you have your old mobile phone number, you'll see I texted you. I'm doing a new show and it's about our relationship. It would be good to talk, not least so you can put forward your position. Because 10 years later, and I still need to know who recruited him, why they recruited him, how they recruited him, when they inserted him into the organisation. I want to know who asked for information about me. What organisation were they working for? Why did they want it? Who get to see it? Where is it now? I want to know how much I was worth. How much did Martin get paid? When did he get paid? Who paid him? What was the method? But most of all, I just want him to fucking admit what he's done. Martin writes back. In an undated letter, he replies, Dear Mark, I think to reopen old, deep and still unhealed wounds can only be a negative. I'm disappointed you would doubt the sincerity of our friendship. After careful consideration, I must decline your invitation. The memories of happier times together will always be with me. Kindest regards, Martin. There is nothing that compels him to talk. 7th of July, 2014. It is a beautiful early summer morning and the sun shines down the River Medway from the east like a golden dart, and I am running in a car park with a cameraman behind me and I am running towards Martin. He backs away from me as I move towards him and he is smaller than I remembered him, though fatter, and he's still smoking. And I'm shocked that I recognise his smell. He says, what's the cameraman for, Tomo? And I point and I say, that's just for evidential reasons. And I tick off that I've complied with the regulations and he now knows he's being filmed. He says, what's all this about then, Tomo? And I say, you need to speak to us, Martin. You have to speak to us. You need to admit what you've done. You need to explain what you've done. You have to speak to us. And Martin says, what difference would it make now, one way or the other, eh? Now, I've made a decision that you will not see his face, that you will not hear his voice, that you will not hear mention of his surname in this theatre. I've made a decision you won't know his children or his wife's Christian names. I've made a decision that you won't know where he lives, not even the town or the city. So here's the question. How do you know that what I'm about to tell you is accurate? Trust. It's all trust. I ask you to trust me. I say to Martin, you need to talk to us because you don't know the damage you've done. And he says, you don't know the damage done to me. You don't know the damage done to my personal life, to my family life. You, Em, Gid and Laura were my best friends. There's not a day goes by when I don't think of you. I regard that time we spent together as the golden years of my life. Do you think I could have done the things I did unless I believed in it? And I say that doesn't matter. Because you owe us. When everyone else deserted you, we stuck with you for a year. We went to bat for you for a year. You owe us. And he says, I will talk, Tomo. I will talk. Not now, just let me get my head together, but I will talk. We hug. He has a Unite bag. He's a shop steward here.
Can you stop me, please? Why are you taking pictures here? Can we ask?
We're just making a film, mate.
Yeah,
Can you give me a second, please?
You haven't got permission. No, you're not. You're not. This is a private, restricted area. You're not allowed to take pictures.
Are you sure of that?
Yes. Yes, we are 100% sure. Can I have your details for you got any ID?
No, I don't have to give you ID, do I?
It is a beautiful early summer morning and I'm speeding in the car back to London and I am on the roof. I haven't slept all night. I'm full of coffee, I'm full of adrenaline, I'm full of serotonin. I cannot believe Martin spoke to us. I can't believe he spoke to us for so long. He is going to speak to us. I'm full of doubt, I'm full of worry, I'm full of love, I'm full of memories. And I get to London and I get to the tube station and I run down the steps. I've got a hoodie, it's flipped up, I've got a thermos flask full of empty coffee and I run down to the platform and I promise you, the first people I see are Hilary Benn and Ed Miliband. Hilary Benn says, oh, hello, Mark, and Ed Miliband says, what have you been up to? And I say, I've been doorstepping a corporate spy. Now, you need to have a full public investigation into this, a full public inquiry. He said, we are having a judge-led... No, you need to have a full public inquiry into this, into the construction blacklist, and into corporate spying, and into police spying, and I bend his ear from King's Cross all the way to Green Park, and then I stand back and I look at myself, wild-eyed, hoodie up, waving a thermos into the face of the leader of the opposition. But he's going to talk. Martin's going to talk. On the 9th of July, he sends me a text. I have carefully and with much soul-searching considered your proposal to meet and talk. I cannot see any personal positives in reopening the whole issue. I therefore, with respect, decline to meet and would ask you please to cease with what is risking becoming intrusive. I hope your shows go well and wish you well for the future. Emily says, if you want to be a spy, what you need to have is the desire to control other people. You've got to have that desire to be able to destroy someone else's life with a single revelation. It's about control. And the only form of control he's got left over us is by not speaking to us, so we keep coming back. Gid says, you've opened the door to him twice and twice he's walked away. Maybe it's time you did that now, Mark. And Laura says, fuck him. But for 48 hours, I lived with the most incredible hope. And this was this hope that completely engulfed me. It was the most amazing false optimism that Martin was going to talk and he was going to tell the truth and he would be a good guy. He would tell the truth, he would admit what has happened and he would be a whistleblower. And he would, for the first time in 17 years, actually be a friend. You remember there was a projection at the beginning of the club, the Peninsula Club. I hired a club to do a secret preview of this show. And I bussed people in, and the club I hired was the BAE Systems Sports and Social Club. We bussed in friends and activists and comrades, some people I've known since I was 11. We gather on BAE Systems land, and I tell this story, and it turns out it's our story because over half the people in that room had been spied upon by corporate or state interests. At the end of the show, amidst spilt drink, slaps on the back, and the moaning, what happened to the chips, Tomo? You promised us chips. Amidst all of that, I got this chair, and I put this chair in front of the stage at the BAE Systems Sports and Social Club, and I got some of the people who'd been spied upon, and I sat them down, and I said to them, I want you to tell them. I want you to tell them who you are.
My name's Dave Smith. I'm a blacklisted construction worker. My name's on a secret blacklist that all the big companies did. Every time I went for a job, when I did this SOAT induction on SOAT, I used to give them my national insurance number. By the end of the induction, when everyone else got taken on, I never got the job. And it happened time and time again, and I was just out of work all the time during the massive building boom. And it's not just me, there's 3,200 of us on this file.
My name is Lois Austin. I was the National Chair of Youth Against Racism in Europe, and I was spied on by Peter Francis, who also spied on the Lawrence family. His the reason for him spying on me apparently was so that a special branch file could be compiled on the anti-racist campaigning activity that I was involved in.
I'm Guy Taylor. I work for Globalised Resistance, and we found out our police spy when he left a message on someone's answer machine when he was grassing people up to the cops. We kicked him out.
My name is Suresh Grover. I'm a civil rights activist who've campaigned with families suffering racial violence and miscarriages of justice. I know that I've been spied on because I made families hold police and state authorities to account.
Who spied on you?
The STS, the Special Branch, and the MI5.
I'm known as Alison. I had a 5-year relationship with undercover police officer Mark Jenner, who I knew as Mark Cassidy, and who I loved very much.
I'm Jason M. Parkinson. I'm a freelance video journalist, and I have ended up on the domestic extremist database, and I've been tracked since February 2006 for doing my job.
One of my best friends for 7 years was an undercover police officer, who we now know as Mark Kennedy, who...
And I was spied on by Mark Jenner.
I was spied upon because I was an anti-racist activist.
2 unnamed officers tried to recruit me as a mole.
2 of them turned out to be spies.
I've been under surveillance since 1996 and on the domestic extremist database from 2000.
So the question is, I mean, at what point do we actually say enough? I mean, at what point does this happen? Is it when an old Liberal loses their data? Is it when 3,200 building workers are illegally denied employment? Is it when undercover cops deceive women into having relationships with them? Is it when a family has their child murdered, they campaign for justice, and the people charged with giving them justice spy upon them? Because surely to fucking God, when you hear that the Stephen Lawrence family was spied upon, I mean, that's the point when all of us have to actually say enough, don't we?
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for coming back, and I hope you enjoyed the show. And I loved seeing it again, I have to say, although it sounds sort of slightly self-congratulatory, but I love seeing it again because I actually love seeing Em and Gid and Anne and and Nick and everyone and Laura. I love seeing them. And it was a funny old thing because when I was performing that show, it was like you with your mates every night because you'd sort of see them every night and they'd be like your mates would come out of a drawer. So what to tell you? Oh, yeah. First of all, we got a little donate. We try and encourage people to sort of do a little bit of something. We've got a donate thing for Campaign Against Arms Trade. Campaign Against Arms Trade is one of those truly remarkable organisations. They genuinely are, and they do amazing work. And so if you've got a few, I know times are tight. I really know times are tight. And I actually had a look for. My nephew works for Aldi, and I gave him a little call. Going, listen, ain't got any jobs going. So I know times are tight, but look, just if you've got a few quid, give it to CAAT, right? Just give them donate some money to them. What we've got, though, we've got an amazing lineup of people who are going to come and talk to us. Some of them you saw. One of them you saw, but sort of like pixelated. But what I wanted to do first is introduce Dave Smith. Now, Dave, if we could bring Dave onto the screen, please. Dave is the chap that you saw towards the end of the show who was blacklisted from the building site. Dave, hello, mate. Good evening. Thanks for coming along. Firstly, you were part of that what was called the construction blacklist. Could you briefly tell me what it was? Tell everyone what it was.
Yeah, well, partly I blame you, if I'm honest. We'll get back to that bit of the story later. But basically, all the big construction companies, and we're talking about the big household names, so Robert McAlpine, Balfour Beatty, Langs, Costains, Skanskas, all of the big multinationals, set up an organisation called the Consulting Association. And what happened is the directors of the multinational companies used to feed in information to this central database about builders, basically, about anyone on a building site who used to complain about health and safety, and once they had the files on people who were complaining about health and safety or unpaid wages or stuff like that, they used to, every time someone applied to get a job on a big building site, they used to check to see if your name was on this list. And if your name was on the list, you never got a job. Or if your name was on the list and you was already on the job, they just sacked you for it. And as I said on the clip, there were over 3,000 people on that list. And in the middle of a building boom, when everyone was crying out for labour, even if you was really skilled, really experienced, basically you was out of work all the time.
Dave, I mean, whenever I talk about police spying and all of that with people, there is a little bit of, oh, here he comes, David Icke and his tinfoil hat. How do we know about the construction blacklist?
Oh, well, very good, yeah. Well, exactly that, actually. Every time we used to say we were being blacklisted back in the day, because it was so obvious what was going on, people used to say we were conspiracy theorists. And then there was a whistleblower came out. Actually, the whistleblower came out because 3 electricians in Manchester stood on a picket line for 3 years. People don't tell these stories, but they stood on a picket line for 3 years because they knew they were being blacklisted. Off of every single job they went on, they'd be sacked within a few days. And a whistleblower came forward, and a Guardian journalist by the name of Phil Chamberlain wrote a story about it. Wrote a story about this supposed building industry blacklist, and then the Information Commissioner's Office. Someone read the story in the Guardian. The union rep literally put it on the table of the person who was the investigating officer for the Information Commissioner's Office, and they did like a 9-month investigation, got a load of warrants, and then finally broke into an office in the Midlands for this organisation called the Consulting Association and found everyone's files. Literally, there were 3,000 files sitting on a desk, and some of the files went back to the 1960s.
You can apply, you know, if you think you're on the list, you can apply and get a copy of your own file. My one's 36 pages. You know, other people's are like up in the 50 pages. And it's like, my stuff's got, when I got elected as a safety rep, literally, when I complained about asbestos on a job, that was recorded in my file. When I took out, when I'd been sacked and then, you know, protested against it, that was recorded. But more importantly, in my opinion, when I was campaigning about the Elusu Dam with you and Nick Iliard, who's also in the thing, that appears in my blacklist file, because the company we were campaigning against, who were building the Elusu Dam, was going to be Balfour Beatty, and they were spying on me because of that. And you as well. I mean, you didn't mention it in here, but of course you appear on the construction industry blacklist as well.
I don't mention it because I used to, as you know, Dave, I used to work on the building site with my dad, and I was so bad at it, I never even want to consider going back. But the point being is, I mean, the companies admitted it in court as well. All these companies you've named, admitted it.
Oh, completely. I mean, it took them nearly 10 years. We had to drag them to court, and they denied it and denied it and denied it. But finally, there was going to be a trial in the High Court. And literally the day that the trial was meant to start, they stood up and made like a 10-page apology, admitting that they'd spied on us, admitting that, you know, they'd been doing it for 40 years. Everything we'd accused them of, they admitted doing. And instead of being a, you know, conspiracy or conspiracy theory, it is genuinely a real life conspiracy.
It becomes a conspiracy fact.
Yes. Yeah.
So tell me, they also had, I mean, they paid out millions.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was the biggest, you know, I was in the construction union, CAAT, and it was the biggest financial payout they've ever won for their, you know, I mean, we're talking, you know, not as much as the lawyers got out of it, but, you know, the unions won a lot of money for their people. But the real annoying thing for that, for all of us is, yes, we got some money, but money's not the same as justice, you know, because, you know, some people lost, if you're long-term unemployed during the middle of a building boom, people lost their houses because of it, people got divorced because of it. In a couple of occasions, I worked on the Jubilee line for a while, and there's a couple of fellas who were co-workers on the Jubilee line who have since committed suicide, who were on the blacklist out of work for a long time. I'm not saying it was the only reason they committed suicide, but long periods of unemployment when everybody else around you is working can't affect, you know, can't be good for your mental health, you know, and consequences, like, you know, actions have consequences. You know, when big multinational companies are forcing people to be out of work, so you know, your kids can't go on school trips and your kids are on milk tokens, then, you know, we take this personally, you know, and a couple of quid's nice, but we know who did it. We know the names of the directors of the multinational companies who did this, and none of them have ever been called to account for what they did. Their companies paid out a few bob, but the individuals who did it, some of them got promoted.
I mean, I think we've both long said this, that actually the only way to stop this, in fact, the only way to not just stop this, but actually to really improve health and safety, because, you know, the building industry has still got the highest death rate for deaths at work. The only way to do it is to put these people in the dock. You put the chief executives in the dock personally and have them liable.
Yeah, precisely. And, you know, the point about this blacklist is they actually targeted safety reps. You know, if you're in an industry where health and safety is appalling, you know, and you've got, as you said, the highest fatality rate of any sector in the country, then you'd think that if you get workers coming forward who are a bit conscientious, who are actually prepared to do something with health and safety, you'd work with them. You know, instead, what they did in the building industry is they sacked them. You know, and when you talked about, you know, the chief executives, the person who ran the Consultant Association, the founding chair of the Consultant Association is a bloke called Callum McAlpine. He literally owns Sir Robert McAlpine Limited. They built the Olympic Stadium, for God's sake. That's you know, he's one of his uncles, I think, was the treasurer of the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher. This is proper establishment just ruining people's lives.
I mean, I think I want to kind of move the conversation forward a little bit to looking at what's happening now about because people have spied on activists, on trade unionists, on anti-racist campaigners, for miscarriages of justice, the campaigns of miscarriages of justice. And now we've got two things occurring. We've got the change of the law that's coming up. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the law, probably people have seen it on the on the social media and stuff over the last few weeks. It's called the Covert Human Intelligence Source Bill, CHIS, which we have great fun with, you know.
I know, it lends itself to it.
Just like, come on. So you've got the CHIS bill, and a CHIS is a state acronym for a police spy, basically. You know, a state spy. It could be MI5, it could be a special branch, or actually, in certain circumstances, it could be young kids who've committed minor crimes, and then the police, instead of arresting them, force them to go and sort of, you know, spy on people who are genuinely dangerous, you know, gangsters in some cases. So the police spies, this law that they're introducing, basically says all police spies, if you're covered by this law, if you're CHIS, spy cops, MI5, any crime you commit, you get impunity from it. And it doesn't, there's no state about what crime it is. So potentially murder, potentially torture, potentially rape would be covered by this piece of legislation.
And this legislation would also cover the fact that it would prevent inquiry and disclosure.
Well, of course, all of the things that we're outraged about, all of the stuff you were talking about, the Stephen Lawrence family, all the stuff that Alison's going to talk about when she comes on, all of the crimes that we think these people have committed, in fact, not think we're committing, in some cases have committed. You know, one of the police officers who I knew was spying on a group of activists I knew, he basically incited a number of people I knew to go and firebomb a charity shop. Literally said that the charity, the story he told was that the charity shop was owned by one of the Italian fascists who bombed Bologna train station in the 1980s, if people remember rightly. Killed about 80 people in the bombing. He fled Italy and came and lived in Britain. He actually lived with Nick Griffin from the BNP for a little while, and he had this charity shop in London. And the undercover police officer was inciting my friend, literally took them there a couple of times and said, look, we should firebomb this charity shop. Literally, the undercover police officers, an agent provocateur, trying to encourage people to commit arson, you know. And if they had committed arson, you know, and, you know, one of the undercover...
That story isn't the only of that type, is it? It's not the only one. I mean, this is really common.
No, not at all. You know, one of the undercover police officers, his name was Bob Lambert. He was spying on London Greenpeace in the 1980s. He was one of the people who co-wrote the famous leaflet, "What's Wrong with McDonald's?" that ended up in the longest running libel case ever in British.
And this is incredible. McDonald's take activists to court for libel, right? And it turns out that an undercover police officer had co-written the document they're being taken to court for.
Yeah, and Lambert was, you know, not only had a long-term relationship with one of the women activists he was spying, he actually had a child with one of the women activists he was spying on, and the one of the groups that he spied on was the Animal Liberation Front, and in Parliament. Sorry, I'm trying to remember Caroline Lucas. Caroline Lucas has named Bob Lambert, the undercover police spy, as the person who planted the incendiary bomb in Harrow, Debenhams in the 1980s and burnt it to the ground. The undercover police officer, according to, you know, what's been, you know, exposed in Parliament by Lucas, as the person who planted the incendiary device. Now, in any civilized society, we'd be saying, what on earth is going on here? You know, the police are meant to be detecting crime, not inciting crime and actually carrying out crime. Yeah. And exactly what you say, this CHIS bill would stop any investigation into any of this stuff because they're given complete immunity from any kind of prosecution.
Okay. So I want to wind up, Dave, but what can people do?
For us, really, it's the public inquiry into the undercover policing stuff starts at the beginning of November, literally in a week and a half's time. And so really for us, it's about getting the publicity out there, because even to this day, I go and do speeches at universities, for example, and so if I do a speech at a lefty group, then people have heard this stuff. But if I go and speak to a university course, sometimes with 100, 150 people in the room, young kids in their 20s, and I talk about this stuff. At the end of it, I ask, put your hand up if you've heard about any of this before. And sometimes no one in the room puts their hand up. And that's the point, because even though you think this is all over the media, it's not. It's quite niche stuff. It gets reported in The Guardian, it gets reported in the Morning Star, occasionally there'll be something in the Daily Mirror, but this is not mainstream. Most British people, most of the public still think that stuff like this doesn't happen in this country. It's like, oh no, it happens on other sides of the world. If it was happening in, China or Cuba or literally anywhere we didn't sell arms to, if it was happening in any of them countries, the BBC would be all over it like a rash, and they'd be talking about, secret political policing, spying on dissidents, and all that sort of stuff. Would be terrible. They'd be shouting about it. When it's in their own country, you get snippets, and we're hoping that the public inquiry will bring this up. And what we want people to do is talk about it, spread the word, just not just with your normal political lefty mates, talk about it with your aunties, talk about it with your uncles, talk about it with your kids, because we want this to become mainstream. That's what people can do for us.
Listen, Dave, it's an absolute delight to see you again. I hope I see you before long, mate. Take care.
And you, mate. Keep up the good work, brother. Ta-da.
Take care. Listen, I want to bring on our next guest, who is remarkable. And I met her some years ago. In fact, she features in the show. We're not going to show her face tonight. You're just going to hear her voice, because she has anonymity in the public hearing that's about to go on. But I'd like to introduce you to Alison. Alison, are you there?
I am. Hello, Mark. I think it's probably quite good that people can't see my face at this time of night, to be honest. It's nice to see your face.
It's lovely to hear you, mate. Are you keeping well?
Yes, thank you. Very well. Yeah, a bit knackered, actually, I have to say. But yes, there's quite a lot going on, as Dave's just explained. But yeah, I'm well.
Talk to me about, what was your reaction when you saw that show? Because you were there, you came along to that PA System Social Club.
The Magical Mystery Tour, wasn't it? It was a Magical Mystery bus. I remember it, meeting at the South Bank. I didn't really know what I was going to, I have to say. And watching it again today, there was a lot that resonated, actually. Some of the descriptions that people gave of Martin, like Emily, I made notes of it. Emily said how different he was, and he didn't give a shit that he was so different, and he was sarcastic and irreverent. And Gid said how he was totally inappropriate and brutally honest. And you said how he was working class and rough around the edges. And all of those things could be said for Mark Cassidy, who real name Mark Jenner. And I think it's interesting. I just think,
Who was Mark Jenner? Tell us.
Mark Jenner. Yeah. Who is Mark Jenner? He's not dead, as far as I know. Anyway, he was my partner of 5 years, who I knew as Mark Cassidy. He joined the political group that I was involved in Hackney. And he is an undercover police officer who I didn't know at the time, but was married with 3 children. And he disappeared from my life 20 years ago in 2000. Yeah, spring 2000, over 20 years ago now.
What was the political group that you were involved in?
I was involved in a group called the Colin Roach Centre, which was an amalgam of different campaign groups that operated out of a centre in Hackney. And the stuff I was mostly interested in was sort of trade unionism and anti-fascism. And the other campaigns that ran out of there were police monitoring and anti-racist campaigns.
And how did you find out?
It's a long story. How did I find out that he was?
Give us the tiny bit. Yeah.
Okay, so it's 2000, it's 20 years ago, it's before the internet, it's just as the internet. I had my computer, I got my computer, I think, in about January 2000. So I wasn't, you know, it's before, we were still on Ask Jeeves rather than Google. He disappeared in March. He came back, I phoned him, he came back for 10 days, he disappeared again. And I couldn't find him. He was scrubbed out his details in my address book. There was absolutely no trace for him. And then within literally a couple of weeks, I spoke to a couple of people and I got in my head that he was an agent of the state. And then I became obsessed with that idea and everybody thought I was mad. In 2003, I met Helen Steele. We had mutual friends and she had a similar story. And, you know, it was just the two of us. She didn't really know if I was telling the truth. I'm not sure she completely trusted me. Well, I know she didn't completely trust me at the time and wondered whether I was just saying it to make her talk about her experiences. And I did what Helen did and I did what Rosa did. And I went to family records offices and I hired a private detective. And by the end of a year, I was convinced that he was lying about who he said he was, and that he was working for the state and that he was special branch particularly. But we're talking 20 years ago, 17, 18, 20 years ago, and no one, but with the exception of, you know, my mum and a couple of my very good friends, most people didn't believe me. And then 10 years later, in 2010, I haven't dropped it. I've moved on in my life, but I haven't dropped the idea. And I was searching, I suppose, on the internet for undercover police, and up popped Mark Kennedy's face. And suddenly, this was October, it was on Indie Media, and suddenly I thought, okay, me and Helen are not the only ones. And then in the new year is when I found Harriet Wistrich and the others, and the 8 of us launched our first case against the Met.
And what has the Met's reaction been? What has the police official reaction been?
Well, they've just shifted all the time. I mean, basically, they've just tried to obfuscate and deny. Their first position was NCND. That's been whittled away. It's, you know, but they don't want to admit anything. The nature of civil cases is such that unless you're a zillionaire, once they make you an offer that is more than you probably get in court, if you were to win, you can't, again, unless you really are a millionaire, you can't say, no, I want my day in court, because you'll end up paying all their costs. And. So we didn't change the law, which is part of the problem, really. So we had to settle, and there are still cases of women. There's still about 8 more women sort of in a tranche behind us who are still fighting their cases, who still haven't had an apology or had any recognition of their claim. And we know of 30 women so far who have had the same experience as me, 30 women deceived by undercover police into relationships, spanning nearly 50 years. And we suspect there are many more.
Do you think there's a sense of, this is what I felt, and it's just entirely what I felt, but I'm asking you if there's a similar reaction, which was when I found out about Martin, I was hugely humiliated, and I felt that I had been duped, that I was stupid, that I should have seen it happening, that I was embarrassed by it.
I think some women have felt that. I didn't, I have to say. I didn't feel that, partly because everybody was duped. I think that helped. Everybody. When I was saying it I saw people react like you reacted in the show. When I was saying, I think Mark's a spy, I think they were like, what are you talking about? Of course he's not. So when it turned out that I was right and he was, actually, everybody felt the same. It wasn't like, oh, other people suspected, it wasn't, oh, everybody knew and I didn't know. So I didn't feel that. But I think in terms of the psychology, what I did think watching the show again was that sense of delusion to make ourselves feel better is part of it. So when Mark disappeared, okay, I kind of guessed, worked out, whatever, I don't know. I convinced myself that he was a spy. But I still told myself for many years, for 11 years, that he still cared about me, that he loved me and he cared about me. Yes, he was a spy, but I created this whole narrative that, you know, he had to get away because either his cover was blown or he was pulled off the operation, but his feelings for me were genuine. Because to tell myself anything else when I didn't know just felt a bit sort of self-harming, really. I didn't see the point. I thought I might as well make a kind of a good story out of the gaps than a nasty story to fill in the gaps. However, in 2011, when I found out, or I think 11 or 12, I can't remember exactly, but as part of the case, I found out that Mark was married with kids. Then I had to have a kind of a shift in perspective. And again, you talked about, you know, the need for truth. You talked about the need to still know, and also you felt a bit sorry for him when you saw Martin's house. It was all shabby and run down, and there was a moment where you kind of felt a bit sorry for him, and you decided to protect his anonymity, and all that holding on to, you know, the kind of being better than they are. I could identify with that. You know, not that I don't feel sorry for him. I don't feel sorry for him, but I do wonder about the extent to which they have been. I mean, I think they bear personal responsibility, but institutionally, there are people above them with more power in the police who I think bear huge amounts of responsibility for this, and I'm not sure how we're able to hold them to account.
This is a sort of slightly bizarre question, I suppose, but do you think that Mark has been damaged by what he did?
I'm not that interested in mining the psychology of narcissistic perpetrators. So I don't really care that much. Does he been damaged? Who knows? It was probably, my feeling is he was probably damaged before he took on the role, because I don't know how you can do a job like that. People, you know, when I've kind of talked about, you know, when we talk about love or you know, that kind of emotional capacity, I'm not sure Mark or any of his colleagues have the emotional capacity of loving someone in the way that I understand it and my friends and my family understand it.
Okay, just what do you want to see out of the hearing?
To see it would be good for a start, because we can't see it. I mean, it's not being live streamed because of the COVID restrictions. We are being pretty much denied access. We're going to get a 10-minute delayed transcript of, you know, hundreds, but hours and hours and hours of words. I don't know how that's going to work. So actually seeing the inquiry would be good, but that's not looking likely. We want disclosure, essentially. We want answers. We haven't got, I don't know whether Mark was authorised or not authorised to be in my life. None of us know. We want a finding of institutional sexism in the police, as there was a finding of the Macpherson report of institutional racism. And I suppose not from the inquiry. I don't know how the inquiry can deliver this, but we're pushing on the issue of consent. Because, you know, again, you said in the show, you know, there's not one law to regulate the activities of corporate spies. Well, there is a law, REPA, to regulate the activity of covert human intelligence sources, but it's clearly inept. It doesn't protect women. This idea that the Human Rights Act is going to protect us, it doesn't. So we want some recognition somewhere that it just can't, this is not acceptable. It's about, I mean, I know I sound like a sort of a 1980s feminist. Well, I am a 1980s feminist, but it's about the patriarchy, isn't it? It's about, and it pushes out across all undercover operations, not just the political people, because I think men, officers, undercover officers are doing this left, right and centre. And when they bugger off after a year or two, the families of the women who live in a pub opposite where a gang meet or are a cousin of someone connected to a bit of criminality, when that man buggers off and disappears, the family will turn around to them and say, just leave it, don't worry about it, it's not worth the heartache, he's a no good, because that's what men do. So that's how they get away with it. So we want disclosure, I suppose. That's the big one.
Listen, Alison, thank you ever so much for joining me tonight.
Thank
you. It's always brilliant to talk to you, mate. And you know, good luck.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
That was our friend and comrade Alison. And what I'm going to do now is introduce you to the last of our guests tonight, which is Dave Perlow. Sorry, Sam Perlow. I'm looking at Dave Smith's name here, and it's Sam Perlow Freeman. How are you, Sam? Sorry for saying I said
Not
Dave.
too bad. Thanks, Mark. Great to finally see your show, as I was around in CAAT at Martin's time. So. Yeah, as I said to you earlier, I was sorry to miss the stage show at the time and really glad to see it now. Had me in tears.
Well, thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you, Sam. What I was going to, I mean, CAAT has been sort of fairly magnificent actually throughout all of this, because in some ways I felt like CAAT was sort of like behaving like a sort of parent compared to my sort of like angsty teenage rowdiness, at my utter fury and disbelief that Martin could have done this. And I think CAAT have just behaved actually brilliantly throughout all of this. And CAAT's a very different organisation to what it was then in terms of kind of security, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Martin was discovered initially by a volunteer because we had zero email security. All emails sent and received by everyone were stored on a common server without password protection. And so a volunteer found all of Martin's incriminating emails. I'd actually said, hey, we need to password protect our emails. It now sounds really ridiculously obvious. But at the time, people were, oh, no, we don't need to do that. If the state wants to find out about us, they'll find out. And even Martin went, poo, we don't need that. And because he did that, he got caught. So there, he was hoisted on his own petard. But now, we have rather better email and cyber security generally, I'm very glad to say.
I think as well that the other thing that I noticed was because I was there when I was in that room with Anne when the call came through to say, you know, they've said they've got your legal documents, and Anne initiated the legal proceeding against BAE Systems. What was very, very clear was that Anne was not going to allow the intrusion of BAE into our lives again in this way to affect the work. And I think the first time round, there was a degree of emotional damage, if you like, that was done to all of us and to the organisations as well, because suddenly you have to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. The second time they were caught intercepting emails between us and our lawyers on a separate case. And so when we sued them over that, they were forced to admit also to the first spying case. For the first time, they were forced to admit that they had placed spies in our organisation, and we got an injunction against them that they couldn't do that anymore. So yeah, no, I'm very glad that we really pursued that.
Tell me, because what I want to do is move on to CAAT's work, because this stuff is important, but actually one of the things is it gets in the way of our work. What Campaign Against Arms Trade do is miraculous, really, in many ways. And as you know, I've been associated with you for a long, long time, and I'm very proud of that. One of the things CAAT have been doing is taking the government to court over arms trading.
Yeah.
Can you bring us up to speed where we are, what's happening?
So, Britain's biggest arms customer is Saudi Arabia, which of course is a horrific dictatorship, and which since 2015 has been bombing and blockading Yemen, killing, along with its allies, killing tens of thousands of civilians and causing the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world, which is almost certainly killing tens of thousands more. Now, Britain has export licensing criteria that should, in theory, stop this. There's one in particular that says an export license shall be denied if there is a clear risk that the equipment may be used to commit serious violations of international humanitarian law, the laws of war.
Let's first of all just raise the irony klaxon here. That there is a law that says if there is a risk that a major weapon could be used in this way, then we might not do it.
So they of course apply as high a threshold for that as they can possibly get away with, and they're still doing this. The fact that it is a weapon that aircraft and bombs whose purpose is to bomb people is not enough, because you need a risk that it will be used for, not just for bombing people, but for bombing people in illegal ways. You know, you're allowed to bomb military targets, you're allowed a little bit of collateral damage, but you're not allowed to deliberately target civilians, and you're supposed to take precautions to avoid hitting civilians and civilian targets, at least hitting them too much, more than would be proportionate to the military gain. It's a bit complicated exactly who you're allowed to bomb and who you're not. But there is such overwhelming evidence in the case of Saudi Arabia. They've bombed marketplaces, weddings, funerals, schools, hospitals, farms, fishing boats, and they've done it again and again and again.
And this is to terrorize as well as to inflict damage. The thing about this is targeting civilians is to incite terror.
Yeah, absolutely. But now the British government, who doesn't just supply the planes, they supply the maintenance, they supply support, they supply training, advice, they do everything but actually drop in the bombs themselves. And the British government...
And if Mark Francois was around, I think he'd volunteer.
Very likely. So the British government say, oh, well, we have very close contact with the Saudis and we give them all sorts of advice on targeting, and we know they mean well. And they don't mean to bomb civilians. And they have an assessment team, an investigations team, joint incident assessment team or something, CAAT. And so we know that they're not deliberately bombing civilians. It's all, you know, tragic mistakes. And so it's not violation, or so there's no clear risk because we train them so well. There is no clear risk of a violation of IHL. And moreover, we know better than you. We have secret information. The United Nations and all these NGOs, Amnesty and Watana, they're very, I'm sure they have very good people, but they don't have the secret information that we have. That's what the government said, more or less.
So what's a CAAT doing?
Well, so we took them to court, and the High Court listened to the government's explanation, and the judge said, well, that sounds good enough for me, national security and all, but we appealed, and we interrogated in particular, or our brilliant lawyers at Lee Day, and said, just a minute, all these allegations of bombing civilian targets, have you actually investigated them to see if they were violations of international humanitarian law, war crimes? And they said, no, well, we don't need to do that because we know the Saudis so well and we train them and blah, blah, blah. And the judge said, wait a minute, what? You're saying there's no clear risk and you haven't of future violations and you haven't even assessed whether there have been past violations? That's bullshit, except they said it in more legal language. And so we won the case at the Court of Appeal last year. And the judges said to the government, you've got to go back and do your homework. You've got to go back through all these alleged violations where civilian targets have been hit and say, as far as you can possibly assess, were they actually or possibly violations of IHL, and thus review all your decisions about export licensing, whether to issue them, whether to cancel them once they've been issued, in the light of that evidence. And so the government goes away and says, okay, and they take their merry time about it. And a year later, after a lot of pushing and reminding that they were supposed to be doing this, they come back and say, well, we've gone over all these cases and we found a few that might have been violations of IHL, possible violations. Most of them, were perfectly okay. They may have hit hospitals and schools and marketplaces, but we don't think they were violations of IHL. We're not telling you why, but we know better. And the ones that were possible violations, they were isolated incidents, and there was no pattern of violation.
And so it's all perfectly okay. They're not breaking international humanitarian law on a pattern, so therefore they can get away with it. Is that correct?
Therefore, they can get away with it, yes. So therefore, we still say there's no clear risk of bad things happening again in the future. So we are just starting the process of trying to call bullshit on that. And it's difficult because the government gets to keep secrets. They get to know things that we don't get to know. They haven't said anything about really in detail about how they've come to the assessments. We don't even know how many incidents they decided were possible violations of IHL. We don't know how they decided the other ones weren't. We don't know how they decided that this isn't a pattern, except that they happened for different reasons and in different times and in different places.
Is this going to be a legal challenge, Sam? This is the.
I can't go into a lot of detail yet, but we have put in initial papers with the court to challenge this again. It's all in flux. We've only very recently got replies from government lawyers from our letters, and we therefore need to. There's more legal stuff to happen, basically, which at the moment I have to keep secret. But things are happening.
Brilliant.
And it's difficult. But with our fantastic lawyers, Rosa and Erin and Ben and all the rest at League Day, we are going to do our best to try once again to call bullshit on the government's defence of these utterly outrageous and blatantly, what should be blatantly illegal arms sales.
Listen, Sam, thank you ever so much for coming on tanaght, and I really, really appreciate your time. And
Thank you, Mark, so much.
One of the things that that I've always loved about CAAT was I always remember when Gid, who we saw earlier in the show, I remember doing a fundraiser for CAAT at the Union Chapel up in Islington. And
I remember that.
It was a lovely night. And Jeremy Hardy was there. It was a really brilliant night. And Gid, one of the things Gid said was the great thing about CAAT is it encompasses everyone, from the people who just want to hold candles and have vigils and stand there and say, I will witness this, through to activists who want to chain themselves to buses and behave like idiots. And listen, thank you and salute to you. And
likewise, Mark, and thank you so much for all you've been doing and for this show. Okay,
take care, Sam. And listen, and for people who are watching, if you could donate a bit to CAAT, that would be really, really helpful. And
yes,
and
please.
thank you. So that was Sam. Listen, thank you for joining us. I don't know how many of you there are left, but thank you. I'm assuming there's someone or Chris will have just intervened and just gone, there's no one there, Mark. You're shouting into the void. So listen, thank you ever so much for coming along to another lockdown special. What I'm going to try and do, if it's all right with you guys, I'm going to try and catch up with some old comrades, and I'll have a chat with them on Zoom about domestic extremism, which is what I'm currently involved in that court case with the police over them recording us as domestic extremists and creating files on us. And I'll try and get something that's very funny, some of the stuff, because actually one of the things. Oh, I'll tell you later. It's really good. But what I'll do is Chris and I will organise a little Zoom. We'll get it together. We'll edit it and we'll send it to you if that's all right with you. Apart from that, it's just really to say thank you to Chris and thank you to Sam. Sam, thank you ever so much, Sammy, for coming along and helping and signing. Thanks to Dave. Thanks to Alison. Thanks to Sam. Thanks to all of the team, which are Bex and Teen and Greg and Jeff and Chris. So I'll see you on the next one. The next one's the Mark Thomas comedy product, Best Before, which is going to be fun with Jeff Atkinson. Listen, the Christmas one's going to be a doozy. We've got a Christmas show, which is really going to be lovely. A because I've got some really great Christmas stories for you. But the Christmas Eve one, which is, I'm obsessed with Christmas music, right? Anyone who knows me would tell you that I'm obsessed. I'm a man who can talk you through Christmas singles. In fact, beyond that, I can talk you through a whole load of stuff that you really don't want to. I've actually got a copy of I'm Spending Christmas with a Dalek, which was a novelty single back way when. So it will be fun. Come and join us on Christmas Eve. As I say, it's all free to join in on there. And we're doing collections for Trussell Trust, and we are doing collections for Samaritans. And as usual, much love to you all. I shall go into the chat room. If there's any questions that you want to ask me, I'll try and answer them. Thank you, everyone, and see you on the next one.